All right, everyone. We have Matt Percaro on today. He's the 203K loan expert that I found, and I really wanted to talk about what the 203K loan is and how you can use it to house hack. Welcome aboard, Matt.
What's going on? Glad to be here, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. So also, it looks like you have a pretty good following. You're the founder of the 203K Way. You're all over YouTube. You have a huge Instagram following. So let's step it back and just tell the audience who you are.
Sure. I always like to tell people I was the guy that knew there needed to be a better way to get into real estate. And I worked really hard until I found it. And it was a way that nobody else talks about. Yeah, I'm Matt Porcaro. I founded the 203K way. But again, like the guy I really am was a guy that always knew that there had to be a better way with everything. Growing up, a lot of financial woes in my family. I would say it was like, from a young age, the uh the beginning of any type of stress or argument between my parents, or like you could just feel it when like we didn't have what we needed coming in, or my parents had their own business. If business is slow, you really felt it. And it always from a young age felt like it was the root of all good and the root of all bad, which good, bad, or indifferent, that's just what I grew up in. From a very young age, I was really just always focused on like, how do I not have this, right? Like, how do I not have this stress? How do I not have these issues? Fast forward, my parents had their own business and they said, well, you want to work for someone else. You want to go get a good job, go to college, do the thing, right? That to them, that stability, that to them was like what was important, and to the and that's fair to think, right? I did that. I was a not a good student by any means. I hated school. Um, but I knew that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something different than what my parents did. So I'm kind of also, in addition to the person that found the way or found ways to get around things or figure out like my best direction in. I was also the guy that just keeps on going until I get by everything by the skin of my teeth. I asked my wife once, what's my greatest superpower? And she gave me an answer I did not expect. Uh, she's like, you have the ability to always show up on time and always be where you need to be, even though you seem like you're going to be late for 99% of it, right? Like she's kind of like, which I knew where she was going with it, but it stresses her out because like basically what she means is like, I'm not a planner. I'm not like, I'll never know what I'm doing until like the very last minute, but I'll always make it work. So that was my college experience. That was my W-2 world experience when I jumped into my corporate job. Like I got a job by the skin of my teeth. I weaseled my way in. I did not have good grades. I went to school for engineering and I realized like that's a really hard program, but I went into it because I heard it made a lot of money. Like, so if you're seeing a pattern here, you're not far off. But, lo and behold, got into the workforce, realized very quickly that that wasn't exactly the dream either. I saw all the downsides of that. I had like 10 days of vacation time a year. I was commuting 3 hours total per day, an hour and a half both ways here in New York. Just having no time control, no time freedom, and also realizing that no matter how hard I worked in my career, maybe you get a small raise, like a 5% raise, but it really wasn't translating. So I realized that that wasn't the way people got rich either. So fast forward, I, started to go in the weeds a little bit because again, I'm always that guy that knew there needs to be a better way. What's the way? Like, how do people get rich? And I read a book that I'm sure no one's ever heard before. It of course is I'm very surprised you even have it sitting behind you. No one's ever heard of it, called Rich Dad Poor Dad. Um, and as you know, and as many people know, especially for a kid like me that grew up in an environment where, the word investing never came up. I don't even think that word made sense in my head. I didn't even know what it was. It was what rich people did, right? It's what successful people do. We don't do that. We're not investors. But that I call it taking the red pill because it was like it kind of opened my eyes to really what's out there. And then again, realized that like the W-2 isn't the answer either. So as you know, like that was kind of the spawn as it was for me, as it tends to be for a lot of people. but living in New York, obviously Robert Kiyosaki talks so much about real estate and he's so pro real estate, but living in New York, in Long Island specifically, right outside of Manhattan, the prices here were just crazy and astronomical. So even after reading that book, I kind of almost did like what my parents did of like, oh, okay, I could understand starting your own business. I could understand like, stocks and investing. Like I get that. But like real estate, no, that's for rich old people. Like that's like I can't buy a house. I'll be lucky if I buy one house, let alone multiple houses, right? I was like, people do that like in the Midwest. They do that somewhere else. They don't do that here in New York. Um, and but then quickly I started to realize that real estate's important and it was the best vehicle. And I tried a bunch of different things, but real estate was always kind of in the back of my head as what I knew I needed to do. So I had been working at my job for a little while, and I ultimately just was like, how the heck do I get into this game? Like, how there has to be a way, right? There has to be other options. And I tried everything, man. I tried wholesaling. I tried, like, took a bunch of courses, did all these things. And again, I'm not smart. Like, I'm not, there are people pick things up. I'm like not an action taker. I'm an analysis paralysis junkie by nature. I'm an engineer by trade. Like I just don't execute on things. I just study, 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 try all the things, test, experiment, like mad scientist in the lab, and ultimately realize that, everything that I had tried was like, was all getting me closer to the fact of like, I just needed to buy something. I just needed to buy a house, my own house, whatever it was. So I was at a local RIA group, being in my time. And because mind you, I was researching real estate for like way too long. I was reading all the books, like watching all the podcasts, all the listening, you name it, I did it. Um, but I was at one of my RIA groups and I tell this story every time and I'm going to continue to tell it every time. But there's a lady, Melissa, who led the group, still does it, I believe, here in Long Island where I'm at. And I spoke to her and I asked her as I pulled her to the side one day, I was like, hey, Melissa, like I've been trying this thing for a while. I'm frustrated. I'm let down. Am I broken? Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, what could I do? Like in real estate in New York, maybe New York, they do something different. And I'm like, what would you do if you were in my situation? I said, I got a little money in the bank. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars like, these private money guys are asking for and these hard money guys. Like, I don't have a 20% down payment for these $600,000 houses. What do I do? So she said, well, listen, I have never personally done this before, but if I could go back in time and do it again, I would use what I think is real estate's best kept secret. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's that? And she said, it's called the 203K loan. And I'm like, okay, what's that? Now, mind you, like I said, I've been studying this stuff for 4 years. I never once had heard about this. So it's kind of weird. Like it's a whole new thing that I've never heard about. And she said, well, it's a owner occupant program, right? So the whole idea is that you are going to live in the property, which was perfect for me in my scenario, right? This isn't, if you have 100 houses and you're looking to do this, this isn't exactly your thing. But for people starting out like me, I didn't own a house yet. Um, she said basically you could get this. It's an FHA loan program, so it only requires 3.5% down. But not only does it give you all the money to purchase the house, it gives you all the money you need to renovate the house. So what you could do is, through the eyes of an investor, is look for a fixer-upper property and get all the money to buy it and all the money to renovate it, which typically only cash investors were going to be able to go after. Now you can get it with a low down payment, very low interest rate compared to what investors are paying. And even better, here in New York, we'll get into the house hacking thing. In New York, she said, well, there's a lot of basement apartments and stuff like that around here. So she said, what you do is like buy a house, live in the basement, rent out the upstairs. You're a single guy. I was dating my wife at the time, but she's like, it's just you. You could live in the basement, rent out the upstairs to a family and get your mortgage paid for. So I was all about it. And I went home and I started Googling stuff and there was no information on it, period. Like to no surprise, right? Because I had been trying for so long. Um, I know it's a really long story, but the reason I tell it is because how I got here, I find that a lot of people got here. And it was kind of just being pushed up against the wall where I didn't think there was any other options. I was just on the phone with someone earlier today, and she's a little older. She she's actually looking towards retirement more now. And she's like, when I found you, it made me so damn angry because there's so many houses we passed on because we didn't know that this was even a thing. We knew that there was houses in neighborhoods we wanted, houses that would have been great things, but we knew we didn't have all the money to put the down payment plus all the money to renovate it. We just didn't. We thought, how lucky are all those people that get to do that? But I was able to do it, and I was able to figure it out just by necessity because this was the only option. So lo and behold, I was searching like crazy. I found a fixer upper duplex property. It was a literal crack house. Nobody wanted it. But it was the only thing I could afford. It was literally like the ugliest thing on the market. And was the only thing I could afford. So I picked it up, and one of the cool benefits of it was that it was a legal two family. And what was cool about that, and we'll talk more about this, we were talking about this a little bit before the call, but unlike kind of the other duplexes that are coming to the market. But it allowed me to forecast the future rental income of the other unit. And I was like, holy cow, I can now afford something in New York because I was making decent money, but even still, it wasn't enough to qualify for the crappiest house on Long Island. But the ability to factor in the future rental income gave me the ability to purchase something and fight out of my weight class and get myself into a market that was really, really tough. So I put 9,500 bucks down. That's all I put down, the 3.5% of the total purchase plus reno. The purchase was 270. The reno was 80. I was all in for 350. Did all the work, ran into all the issues you could think of, but got it done. And it reappraised 8 months later for $130,000 higher. So 480,000. Not to mention I was living in one unit, renting out the other unit for 2,000 a month. So I was basically living for free. I've since obviously moved out. I still have that property. It still cash flows me $2,000 a month free and clear. And that really started me on my journey. And I've always just kind of been replicating that value add slash house hacking process and everything that I've done since then.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you went through the story of, which is a crazy story to start. Yeah, you were in a high cost of living market where there's some people are in those markets. I'm in Cleveland, so we don't deal with that. But you found a way to buy a house, get all the renovation covered, and still get that 3.5% down payment. Now, let's cover a few of the things like you can't just use any contractors, right? How did you vet your contractors for this?
It's a great question. You can use any licensed and insured contractor works. A common misconception is there needs to be like a HUD approved
Okay.
contractor, like a 203K certified contractor. That's not a real thing. HUD doesn't certify contractors. There's like they can get a certification online, but that doesn't mean it's basically like I took a test to know how to do it, right? It gets them, it gets them to understand it, but it's not a requirement. So
Okay.
any licensed and insured contractor works. Now, the whole idea is like anything else, right? So my background's in construction. So everything that the 203K tells you to do, which is get a licensed and insured contractor, put together a clear scope of work, make sure that they have their paperwork together, make sure that they're like a real business and, be able to support that in documentation. That's how like construction should be done. The problem is everybody flies by the seat of their pants these days. And like you hear about all the contractor stories and like they're all horror stories. And it's like, oh, well, what happened? Like, well, go after him. Didn't you sign a contract? No, there was no contract. Oh, okay. Well, why couldn't you find someone else to get it done after him? Well, because we got a contract bids from other contractors, and it turns out that we need $50,000 more to do the work.
Mhm.
And it's like because you went with the cheapest person, you didn't validate your numbers, all that stuff. So any contractor that's licensed and insured can work on this.
Yeah, so the problem is people that don't want these jobs are the people that have to have a good scope of work, right? The contractors that can put together a budget. Because if you don't budget high enough, you're going to run into problems, right, down the road with this kind of loan.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's cool about it too is like they do know they know that there's always in construction, there's always
Okay.
mishaps or always things that come up. Automatically on every 203K or any renovation loan for that matter, they're going to build in a 10% contingency. And that's a reserve that's in addition to whatever your agreed upon number is with your contractor, but it's there just as as a lifeline. If you don't use it, it goes back to your principal, which is nice. But pretty much everybody typically uses it because that's how construction goes. But it's there to protect you in that regard.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course the numbers we just have to pencil, right? Like if to get that to get your reno budget, you still have to still has to be a deal. It has to be something the banks are willing to lend on, right?
Yeah, so that's what I talk about like with what I do with everything, right? Like I talked about it before. Like value add investing is everything. Like a good deal, a good buddy of mine, Ryan Dossi. I don't know if you know him, but he's or we've been, in the Instagram sphere for a while now. He owns Ballpoint Marketing, is a really successful wholesaler. And he says this a lot, and I've adopted it, is a good deal absolves all sins. And really what it comes down to is like when you shop right, like a lot of this stuff, what people try to do is they try to save on the renovation. Like you can't save on a renovation. The numbers are the numbers. Common newbie misconception is that like there's a guy out there that's going to do it way cheaper than everybody else. Now that might be right to some degree, but the problem is unless you really know what you're doing and they're vetted, you don't know if it's them just like not being licensed and insured and worth it, or are they just did they miss the scope of work? You don't know what it is. So you have to just assume like what's the market rate for doing this and do that right, because God forbid the contractor walks on the job, they screw you over, they take your money and run, blah blah blah. Then you're left over with whatever you have left, and then you're have to gonna find someone else that's gonna be able to do it for that low budget. So definitely don't recommend that. And that's kind of the point of why we do this in the way that we do it, is because we find good deals, and then also like big tip is like with all rent, I'm doing it to my own house right now. I'm renovating my own house using a renovation loan, Fannie Mae home style, which is the exact same thing as a 203K. 203K is like the colloquial term that we all use, but there's a lot of different renovation programs out there. A good lender will put you in the right one. But basically like I always shop out everything. Like you have to get multiple bids, because if you don't really know what's high, what's low, and what's middle. You just get one, you'll never know if like their numbers are correct.
I got you. Yeah, and we're not going to dig deep into everything you talk about. You have so many different communities where people can follow you. So before we move on to my next question, let's talk about everything you're running because you are all over the place.
Yeah. It's a great, yeah, it's I never thought, like, to be clear, like I never thought that this would be what it is. When I first did this, I just wanted to be a real estate investor, and this was just an avenue to get me there. But what I came to realize is that a lot of other people were just like me, that were struggling in high cost of living area. I mean, screw it, not even in high cost, just in general, right? Like they want to be real estate investors, but they want to get their first crack at the bat. And I say that this is like landlording on, with training wheels on. This is flipping with training wheels on. So I started posting about it on Bigger Pockets and stuff like that, and people were just reaching out like crazy, because again, like the 203K isn't completely secret, like it's out there, but there's no backup information from it. Or it's like very specific from like lenders or agents. You have a lot of agents and lenders that talk shit about it because they don't understand it, and they naturally will just talk badly about it rather than getting educated on it, because that's what people tend to do if they don't, at the end of intelligence is ignorance, right? So you have people that are like bad mouthing it because they've never done it. But I had done it myself. I had helped some friends and family members do it themselves. And like I had just seen the success with it over and over again. So I started just posting about it on Instagram. Like I asked my wife if she thought that it would be a good idea, and she said no, but do it anyway. So I did, and I started posting about it, and it just gained a ton of traction. So built a following on Instagram, built a following. I have a Facebook group where people can, it's focused on house hacking and renovation loans. And these, all these communities. Obviously, I have my personal clients, my coaching clients, all that stuff. But any combination of it all, I think what's cool is like it really started with the investor minded people, the house hacking minded people. Cause again, like, and we could touch on this a little bit if you want, but like, I just think that it's the only way to house hack right now. Like without it, because house hackers get into it because they ultimately want to be real estate investors to some degree, right?
Mhm.
But this is enabling you to house hack and continue to roll it over and roll it over because of the equity and all that stuff that you gain from this. Um, but what we're finding now is like, given the market conditions right now, like people can't afford. You have a two working class people that make decent money that still can't afford a property in their market. What are they going to do? This is a way that you can get the house you want in a market you otherwise couldn't afford, this is the only way in for some people. So I'm starting to expand more, which has been cool in the last year, to like every first time home buyer, or every home buyer in general, that's looking to buy their next house. It's just a great vehicle and it shouldn't be slept on.
Yeah, so I want to touch on one thing that I've heard before, and you can debunk me or whatever.
Yeah.
When it comes to these houses need work, some of them are and some of them aren't livable, really, when you buy them, right? They're not always like move-in ready. Like you have to get some rehab done, right?
No, mine was a crack house. I mean, it was like
So,
literally like condemned almost.
so you're buying a duplex to hopefully cover your monthly payment with rent on the other side. Do payments start right away?
Nope.
Like,
They don't
okay,
have to.
all right,
So great question. And this is a cool thing that goes into effect. This podcast right now is October 23rd. This goes into effect November 6th. This is a crazy thing. So one of the cool things about the 203K is they knew that. They knew that if you're doing a big renovation on your house, how can you afford it? You might have to be renting somewhere else. How do you afford both? And this is getting back. There's a theme here. Getting a good deal, all this stuff really matters. They allow you to wrap up to the first 6 months mortgage payments, including PITI, right? Principal, interest, taxes, insurance. They allow you to wrap up to the first 6 months mortgage payments into the loan. Now, they're realizing, especially in places like where I'm at a year on my renovation because I'm also doing a mega renovation,
okay,
right? With permits and things are slow, blah blah blah. FHA has just now extended it to 12, so you can effectively put the down payment down 3.5% down, wrap in all the closing costs, wrap in everything, and not have to pay for that property for 12 months after the closing date. And you can have this thing be built out, gaining all the equity on it while not having to pay it. So it's a great feature that a lot of people don't know about. But what I will say is the caveat to it is that adds to your loan, right? It
yeah,
allows you to wrap it in. So it will include your loan amount. But when you have a good deal and when you build that stuff in, it's great. Now, another crazy thing, and I don't recommend this at all, is that the 203K actually allows you to get 110% of the ARV. So they actually allow you to over leverage it by 10% of what it would be valued. Now, this is again for people that maybe want to wrap in all the costs and wrap in all that stuff. I don't advise that, but it's just one of those things where like for people, if they're like, people are out there, they're like, I just want to buy a house. I need this place and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to stay in it for 20 years. They know that the equity over time will take over. But yeah, great question and really good timing because they just adjusted it and it's pretty crazy right now that they're doing that.
awesome. So let's touch on something that I saw you post on Facebook, and it sounds like you're talking about it tonight. How can you find these hidden duplexes you talk about in markets?
Yeah, great question. So, hidden duplexes. So I used to call it the Fannie Mae loophole, but the other programs are starting to do this as well. Number one, this is purely lender specific. So, your lender has to know how to do it, understand it, be custom with it. Shameless plug. If you need a lender for that, the 203kway.com/lender. I have a group of lenders that I'm partnered with and these guys and gals know this thing.
Okay.
Because I want to explain this because if you go to your lender talking about this, nobody else is going to know this except a select few. But it's it's out there. They've made the note in all of their new legislation. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA has now said that they will include projected rental income on even non-conforming units of properties that are livable. So what does that mean? What that means is in many markets, I'm sure where you're at, you have split level homes, you have mother-daughter houses, flats, they call them
Yep.
sometimes, whatever. Any type of house that has any type of ability to put another livable unit in it, right? Again, mother-in-law suites, ADUs are becoming extremely popular. That's
Yeah.
really the new that's the new fancy way of calling it. And that's becoming more and more of a thing. Now, these institutions know that ADUs are the future, which I strongly believe. It's the future for house hacking. It's the future in general. This is the only way to curb the housing crisis that we have in America right now. Good, bad, or indifferent, we can fight it all day, but like that's the immediate solution for this is just allowing single family homes the ability to provide affordable housing. they'll allow you to forecast the future rental income. They never used to do this. So when we talked about with me, with my duplex, the way I was able to get in is because it was a legal two family. So since it was a legal two family, that $2,000 a month income got projected to my debt to income ratio. And that raised my ability to get approved for a mortgage just enough to be able to buy a house and fight out of my comfort zone, or fight out of my price range rather. Now you have the ability on damn near any single family home in the United States that has some type of accessory unit within it. They'll be able to forecast that income the same way they would with a duplex. Now, when I say hidden duplex, what I mean is these are like buddy of mine, Brad Seidel. He does a lot of ADUs. He calls it like the rich man's duplex. It's like a single, you're getting all the benefits of a duplex by being in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a huge opportunity right now because nobody knows about it. And I'm telling you, like once people catch on, it's going to change the game tremendously. But people in my community have been doing this. It's very big here in New York, and it's like an absolute game changer. It's fighting with a complete different weapon than other people are. And before more people find out about it, you definitely want to jump on top of it, especially if you're looking to house hack.
Yeah, and these duplexes, for the most part, listed on MLS aren't going to be in multifamily, right? I mean,
No, they
you're going to
won't
see
be.
these
They
in
won't.
single family. Yeah.
Yeah, so little quick tip. The way you do this is a couple of these keywords, right? So when you go on Zillow or you go on MLS or whatever, set up your keywords to be, I like to just say mother, because if it says mother in the listing, it's probably you
Mother-in-law
know what I
suite.
mean? Like you just
Yeah.
yeah, you just want keywords, right?
Yep.
You don't want to get too specific because you don't want to limit yourself.
Yep.
So mother, egress, meaning outside egress, that typically was that what that means, outside entrance, split, accessory, ADU, granny, any of that stuff. You start adding those in because those are income producing portions of your property that, again, perfect for house hacking. But most importantly, the lending institutions are recognizing it now. They never did. And again, when you're shopping next to one buyer and another buyer, they know about it. You know about it. They don't. You're going to win every time because you know that the potential on that property is different than what they're expecting from it.
Yeah, that's definitely a game changer. It allows you to qualify, a little bit more than your income because now they're taking your rental income from that unit that's not really a duplex.
100%.
And these units are usually are zoned single family residential. They're not zoned multifamily. So you're usually in areas where you have a higher chance of appreciation, right?
Oh, 100%, right? And that's what I tell people too, is like with my whole strategy with the 203K strategy and everything, the whole idea is to find a fixer upper property and build up the equity on it.
Yep.
It's way more common to build a lot more equity. I used to call it like the equity and unit curve. Like the more units you have, the harder it is to gain equity. The less units you have, the easier it is to gain equity. Just because there's more out there, there's more to compare to. It's easier. Like even when your appraisal comes in, it's a little better. So, yeah, it's a huge part. And like another way to look at it too is like this is rough. This is depending on a lot of different states and taxes and everything like that. But like my lender partners basically say like for every 1,500 a month in rent that you could produce from an accessory unit, we can add about $100,000 in buying power to your pre-approval. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, for the people that are struggling or trying to find something, I mean, this is a huge key. And I tell people, like, even if you're a first-time home buyer that's struggling, I understand there's some people out there that don't like the idea of sharing their living space, but I'd be, I mean, I'll go out on a limb and say like my grandparents and whatever, when they came to the US, like from Italy and Ireland or wherever they immigrated from, right? Like they all moved in and they all lived together in one big
Yep.
house, right? Like so when people say like the American dream, like that was the American dream.
Yeah.
Everybody house hacked. The house hacking is as American as it gets. So when you're first starting out, like don't sleep on that opportunity. Like my parents did this. My parents rented out the basement. They did it 20, 30 years ago, but they didn't do it to be real estate investors. They did it because like it was called like how the hell else do you afford a house in New
Right.
York? Right? Like they did it by necessity. We all coined it house hacking. It's super fancy now, but like it's a real thing and there's no shame in it. And you don't have to do it forever. Even if it gets you into your house, maybe you get a raise down the line. You don't have to rent it out later, but man, what an opportunity. just to start. And then also at the end of the day, solving a really big problem in the United States right now, which is a lack of housing. It just being able to, it's no better time than ever. You're providing housing to people that need it. The best business is provide a really in-demand item to a starving audience. And you have a lot of people that really need a place to live right now that's affordable, and you have something that you can provide for them. That's the best business model to be in, and you can be the change you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's seriously just the biggest hack, whether it's with the 203K loan like you're talking about, or just house hacking, or a combination of both, which is a superpower, really. I mean,
Right.
why wouldn't you start this way? We grow up renting maybe when we started, and you're paying somebody else's mortgage, you're paying somebody else to rent, and then you buy a house and you don't want to share your space anymore. I just never understood that.
Yeah, I listen, I understand it, but what I wish people would understand more is that your house doesn't need to be, especially your first one or your first couple, do not need to be. That's where people mess up, right? And there's a lot of different things we could blame, and
Yeah,
I don't think we should blame anything but ourselves. But to be fair, like, the social media and real estate agents pushing you into things that you can't afford and getting you to
yeah.
emotionally buy, it's a real thing. And
Like your
people get
dream
sucked
home.
into the
Yeah, your
yeah,
dream home on your first house. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that we're finally building our dream home now. I always said it's crazy because I've bought and sold many houses, but I've never and renovated them, and I've never renovated like my own long term. I mean, my house hacks, like, I knew they were going to turn into rentals eventually, so I didn't really care that much.
yeah,
But now it's like my own house that I'm actually living in long term with my family, and it's a completely different game. But this is years later we're
yeah,
talking. I mean, I've been in the game for like over almost 8 years now.
yeah.
And only now am I building our like dream home where we're putting everything, our, kitchen we want, fancy, fanciest of like fixtures and bathrooms and everything like that. But like, set yourself up first. There's no shame in that.
Right. Realistic expectations. Your first 5 years of investing, whether it's this or something else, are going to be rough. Like you're going to be putting all your money into your investments for the most part.
Exactly. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, Matt, you already talked about some of the places follow that, people can follow you. I'm gonna put everything that you want me to list in the description of this video.
Sure.
Um, for my audience, closing thoughts, what do you want to leave my audience with? New investor just starting out looking for their first property.
Man, I think one thing I'm seeing a lot, if you're a new investor, you want to get started, right? The biggest thing I get in DMs and people reaching out to me is like, "Oh, my market's too expensive. I can't find deals. I can't find deals. I can't find deals." And I ask them, "Okay, what are you doing to find? What are you looking for?" Well, I'm seeing some prices on Zillow and I'm running it on a bigger pockets calculator. Great. I can't stress enough. If you are if you are not placing offers actively, aggressively, you are not looking for deals.
Yep.
You are window shopping. You are browsing. You are doing nothing different than going on Amazon and looking through Amazon and seeing if they're like there's nothing like this is not it's not Amazon. Like, I call it like being Amazon, but even like Amazon, it's like, oh, it's a discount. And when you realize, if you ever see Prime Day is always hilarious. My wife just did this. There were some toys that she wanted to buy my kids, for the holidays coming up, their birthdays and stuff. And she's like, I'm writing down the prices so that on Prime Day, I want to see if there's actually a discount. There wasn't. They just make it seem like they say there's 30% off, but there's not. It's not 30, it's 30% off some made up number. So the point being is like, when you look on the MLS or you look on Zillow, these properties are not priced to make you a millionaire. They're
Right.
not priced to make you rich. You have to go out there and actually find the deals and make the deals happen. Deals aren't found, deals are made, right? So you're not like, finding isn't just like you're like, oh, I found this one on Zillow and it's priced awesome. Nobody else saw this, right? That's not the game. The game
Yep.
is actively making offers, actively networking, actively having conversations with agents on exactly what you want, and being persistent as possible with that, and being as aggressive as possible with that, because that's how stuff comes back into your pipeline. The sooner I figured that out, the quicker I started to see success in this. And it's just like you have to go out and take what you want. Just browsing Zillow and complaining that your market's too expensive is not real. Your market's not too expensive. You just aren't doing anything to find a deal. You're doing what everyone else does, which is just browse. It doesn't
Yep.
separate you from a first-time home buyer at all. I say it all the time. I mean it in the nicest way possible, but any idiot can offer asking price on Zillow.
Yep.
That takes no skills. If you want to be an investor, you have to develop skills.
Yep.
And that's the first skill.
Yep. Definitely. Stop window shopping. Find your buy box. Know what you're looking for. So
Yep, exactly.
awesome. Well, Matt, thank you for spending the time to come on today. I appreciate you jumping on, and I hope my followers start to look into this as another option.
Yeah, Paul, anything I could do to help you guys, help anybody listening. I'm an open book at the 203K way on Instagram. Reach out, DM me, tell me you found me from Paul's show. I'm happy to help.
Awesome.